In this video, I'd like to show some of the new forms improvements that have been made in Matchlib recently. From the top menu, I'm going to click into Forms, and this will take us to a list of where we have all of our custom forms that we've created. You can see here that I've got two, one called Standard and one called Tournament. These ones have both been added as favorites, which means that they appear in the global menu here so that I can create a new match from this handy menu. If I remove one from favorites, so we'll remove Standard, and we see it's now no longer available here. What I want to show today though is the new enhancements around creating forms and a new language that we've created to help create custom forms easily. So let's go ahead and click on Create Form. This will bring us into the new form page with a bit of a template in place already. I'm going to go ahead and we can see that there are some buttons created here and they appear in the form preview. I'm going to go ahead and delete what's been in there, and we can now see that there's an empty form. So what we'll do is describe the new language. You can get help on the new language by clicking on this help link. If we click on that, it'll take us to a page here that explains how to use the language. So it's quite good help that has been created for that. I'm going to give the form a name. Let's just call it New Features. And creating a button on the form is as simple as typing, can be as simple as typing a word. So if I type the word press, I get a button here called press. Then I can hit a new line and type in the next button that I want, which might be outlet. And so both of those buttons appear here on the same row. If I wanted them on separate rows, I can use the row identifier, which is just two dashes, and that will put them on different rows. Forms have two columns, and so I could actually put in a pipe, and that will put the one button on the first column and one button on the second column. So that's simple buttons and the concept of rows and columns. So I'll delete that column, and actually I'll add a column, and I'm going to show the use of complex button types. So simple button types, you just use the name of the button that you want to appear, and it will create a button. For complex button types, where we might want to configure the color, or maybe give it the button a different type or other properties, which we'll talk about a little bit later, we can use this syntax, which is a hash and then an opening and closing bracket. And inside of that, we can type our name. In fact, I'll just name, let's call it special. And so we've got a compound button, and the name attribute is special, and so we can see that that appears here. This is syntactically the same as this, but what using the complex button types allow me to do is put in other properties. So for the special button, I want it to be red, and so I type color and red, and we get a red button. So these new complex button types come in really handy when you want to create custom forms that are easier to use. So that's three buttons. They're on one row, and the special button is red, and it's on the second column. What I'll do now is I'm going to create a row, so a new row, and I'm going to type. We're going to record goals for and goals against. So I've got two buttons, and then I'm going to create a column, and over in the second column I'm going to put some labels. And what labels will allow me to do is when I click, say, the goal for button, I'll be able to click a label and it will add data to that event to say how the goal was scored. So again, because we're creating a different type of button, it's not an event, it's going to be a label. I'll need to create a compound. I'll give it a name, and let's say the first label might be that the goal was scored was a field goal. So we'll give it a name, and over here we see that button's appeared. And because we haven't given it a type, it thinks it's an event button. So let's now give it a type and call it a label. And we see here we've got now a label, and labels appear as grey buttons by default. So I'm going to copy that 4 times. We've got 4 labels there now, and let's say the second type of way we can score a goal might be through a corner or a flick or a 1v1. So there's my 4 labels, and so that shows the difference between event types of buttons and label types. There's one more button type that I'd like to show, and it's a switch. And so I'm going to create a row, and what switches are is it can have a state that's on or off. So an event button, when we click it, it will stay on or active for a certain period of time. A switch will stay active until we turn it off. And so the switches are good for recording things like possession. And so what we'll do here is we'll create our compound button, because it's not going to be an event. We're going to have to create a compound so that we can give it a specific type. And let's say the name will be possession 4. The type will be switch. Let's say the color will be grey, and I'm going to give it a tag, and I'm going to call this A. This possession 4 switch down here, I'm giving a tag of A. I'm also going to create another switch, which will be possession against, and we'll call that tag B. Tags are just ways to identify different buttons, which come in handy. So what would happen here is if I was coding the game and we got possession, I could click possession 4, and then when possession changed over, I could turn possession 4 off, and I could turn on possession against. And this would allow me to record the momentum of possession. That's all good, but we only ever want one of those 2 buttons to be active at any given time. And so what we can now use is another new concept called connections. So at the bottom of my form, I can declare a connections section. And connections are again configured using the compound syntax. And they have a type and a source and a target. So the type will be deactivate. And what this is going to mean is that when we click possession 4, which is tag A, we want to deactivate tag B. So the type will be deactivate, the source will be tag A, and the target will be tag B. And connections aren't visible in the form preview, they're sort of invisible, they sit in the background. So now we've got this connection. When we click tag A, possession 4, we will deactivate target, which is tag B. And we want to do the reverse as well. So I'm going to copy that connection. And when we click on B, we want to deactivate A. So now we've got our form. We've got events for pressing and outletting, goals for and against. When we have goals, we can label them. with specific metadata. We've created another event for specials, which is a highlighted color, and we've got our switches, which we've got connections so that we'll only ever have one connection available at a time. So let's save our new form. When we save it, it will be favorited by default. So we can go ahead and start a new coding match from the top menu. Let's click in there. Now we click new game. Let's call it competition A, and we've got team A versus team B, and we'll click create and start our game, and we can see our form is all displayed here. So what I would normally do is to click periods when the ref blows the whistle to start the first period. We'll click period 1, the period button, and that will say that it's period 1. And we do the same thing each time for each period. There's a few reasons for that. One is having the period markers makes it easy to line up the video with the whistle being blown. And the other one is that we'll see some metadata gets added with all the events that we click during the game to tell us what events happened in what periods, which is just a useful statistic to monitor. So we click in one of the event buttons. Let's click press, and we can see that it's active, so it's green. At the same time, I'm going to click possession 4, which is our switch. Well, what we see is that the press event deactivated after a given time, whereas the switch remains active either until I click it again, or if I click possession against, because of our connection, it will deactivate the possession for and activate possession against. We'll see that if in the history. So we can see that we clicked our marker at the start of the game, we clicked press, and it was labeled with the period when that event occurred. Then we clicked possession for, that was labeled, and then we clicked possession against. And so if we make a coding error, we can remove those from the history timeline. So again, I can either click possession for, or I can deactivate the switch that's on to turn it off. So now we could click the goal for event, and while that's active, I can click any label such as field. And because I've clicked that label while the goal for event was active, that label will get added to the goal for event. Again, a useful bit of data if we're doing analysis post-match to see where our goals came from, or other types of attributes we might want to measure. We might want to measure how possession changed, for example, and what led up to that. So that's the new forms enhancements. Encourage you to play around with them and provide any feedback. As always looking to build improvements into the coding tool. Thanks for watching.